This afternoon, we wanted to be able to, I heard, during the course of the day, a number of speakers indicating where are the funds? Where is the money? And, we have to understand that we are a small island state, and the government has, very limited space in terms of their fiscal space, and we have to utilize the resources that we have. We have seen that we have a huge, vast resource of intellectual capital, particularly by the number of luminaries who have spoken today, as well as other persons, our Nobel laureates, etc. So we know that there is potential for us to be able to rise and fly and use all our wings, like Mr. Romulus has indicated on a few occasions. But if we think of the SLDBs, before I speak to the SLDB's mandate, I want to just indicate that innovation to us, similar to what Dr. King spoke of this morning, is really looking at solutions to a problem. But at the same time, understanding that according to the Bible, there is nothing new under the sun, that everything really has, is there for us to bring to the fore, for us to utilize all the resources and skills that we have to be able to bring it to the fore. I also wanted to share a quote by Sir Arthur Lewis, where he indicated that the collective judgment of new ideas is so often wrong that it is arguable that progress depends on individuals being free to back their own judgment despite collective disapproval. And when you think of, persons who, for instance, who spoke earlier this morning, Mr. Callis Noel, when he was faced with the challenge to come up with a solution, a lot of people may have said, well, no, you're crazy, that can't work. But here, months later, we have our, the mobile desalination plant. We also have young entrepreneurs, Mr. Dujon, for example. He, when first people would have said that's not possible to make fertilizer from the sargassum seaweed. But again, he's on the shelf, so much so that he was listed on the Forbes under 40 top 40 people in the world. So these are things that are quite within our capability. The challenge that we are seeing, though, is that financing is not flowing to high priority projects in vulnerable countries. And this was identified by our colleagues at the Global Green Growth Institute. And they have decided to really, take the bull by the horn to see how best they can make that change, to be in a position to get access to financing and to be able to make projects or bring bankable projects. That's one of the things that even we at the bank have challenges with where persons have great ideas, and we are now trying to see how best, and you will see that in our priorities, how best we then can move from doing research to the innovation. When we talk about innovation and the research, we look at it from two perspectives, one internally and externally. As a bank, we have to look internally to be able to come up with our strategic plan and look at our key priority areas and to be able to facilitate the access to credit within our existing environment. How do we do that? Well, like any other business that has to do a strategic plan, we would look at our current situation, we would scan our environment, we would come up with our key priorities, and then we would start an implementation program. Some of it may require for us to look closely at our human resource skills and also our actual plant and equipment. And we have found that, and when you look at a financial plan, especially for a development bank, that the priority may not necessarily be profits, but in most cases it's impact, and seeing how best we could impact the key priority areas that would have been identified. What's the end game? In terms of our objectives, our plan, our strategy, our priorities, we have to look to see how best we can align these with the government's focus. Because we don't want to be pulling in different directions. We want to be able to facilitate the direction set by the government, to be able to see the expansion of credit and to allow persons, particularly the vulnerable, to improve on their well-being through access to finance. One of the key areas that the bank has looked at is resilience and being able to build resilience in everything that we do. We want to be able to make the entity, the St. Lucia Development Bank, more resilient. And by doing so, it will then cause other persons within our society to also follow suit. Because once we are strong enough, we'll be able to finance and support the projects. The Development Bank prides itself on being able to provide technical assistance in all of the areas in which it undertakes to serve the community. We look at seeing how we can make persons resilient from their household perspective. And that's one of the things that you would have seen. We have adopted the Climate Adaptation Financing Facility, which is a loan facility for eligible households and businesses to increase resilience in disaster and climate change impacts. And most recently, as of Friday, we had a relaunching of what we would call the new CAF, the Business Recovery Program. And this now has taken into the consideration the impact of COVID on the small and medium-sized businesses. It's a pilot program that the World Bank was running, and they provided $5 million for us to be able to run the program. Ideally, it looks at activities to strengthen the household, but it also takes into consideration looking at the agriculture sector in particular to see how we could strengthen the farmers and to be able to facilitate them in having their produce brought to market in the most efficient way. We also looked at infrastructure development, something that's key. And, from our perspective, we want to be able to see a holistic urban development plan, a land use plan, so that it will allow for us to be able to identify the key areas that must be kept in agriculture, the areas that we know that as we expand in terms of the population and the need for housing, that we can have homes built in areas that we would avoid the flood-prone areas of St. Lucia, the landslide areas, and to allow persons to traverse to and from their homes as safely as possible. Where are we now? These are the questions that we start to look at when we start to do the research. Where do we want to be? How are we going to get there? How will we monitor our progress? And what are we going to do? Who is going to do what? We have had a number of consultations in that we recently completed our strategic plan, which was through the assistance of Dr. Harvey Miller. And with that, we engage persons from throughout the length and breadth of St. Lucia. In conjunction with doing our strategic plan, we were also able to do a gender policy and action plan, where even the likes of Mrs. Seeley was with us and gave her input so that we could have input that into our plan to know all what we have to do to address the gender equality. It's a work in progress. It's not complete. We have the plan, but we're now moving to the implementation stage, which will see us addressing some of the issues that Mrs. Seeley spoke about earlier in terms of gender inequality and having our products focused to permit persons to have access to credit that maybe traditionally they wouldn't. But just to be clear, the Development Bank was considered as being very gender neutral, meaning that we have almost an equal balance of financing facilities to women and men. Some product sectors, we do have an imbalance, and these are the areas that we will be looking closely at. In terms of dealing with our end game in resilience, as I mentioned, we have facilities that will look at improvements in agriculture. We look at how we'll be able to improve households and how we'll be able to facilitate improvements in the manufacturing sector. We've seen where financing for all of the latest technology using greenhouses. We have forming a collaboration with Guru, Jade Hutchinson and his team for us to be able to facilitate the easy rollout of technology within the agriculture field, where we provide financing for the the drought and disease resistant crop. We're looking at soil stabilization and greenhouses. All of these areas for us to be able to assist businesses and individuals to achieve their goals. The climate adaptation facility, I mentioned that. In terms of agricultural focus, part of our research that we had done recently through the World Bank and their funding that they have provided to us via the CAF, we had Dr. Felix Jaria do a comprehensive review of persons within the agriculture sector. Both we held consultations in the north and in the south with farmers and also many stakeholders. And some of the things that he identified that there's a need for intervention, particularly in the post-COVID world, where we will need to see persons storing a lot more of their produce, because if the hotels are not available for the offtake of their produce, we will need to store it, to be able to process it, to be able to use it at a later date. We're also trying to see how best we could improve in the technology and communication, where we have seen recently the launching of a number of platforms for farmers to be able to indicate that their produce, what produce they expect to grow, and by when, the yields, and so that they could have a more standardized approach to their farming. We have seen recently where the St. Lucia Marketing Board has entered into contracts with a number of farmers to be able to say, okay, let me see how I can guarantee you a market, and therefore you will produce what we are asking for. And all of this is looking at, one, improving on our food security, as well as reducing our food import bill. We have seen where there's a need for greater investment in agriculture to become self-sufficient in a few critical crops to begin to address the issue of the same food security, as I mentioned, and also to look at an aggressive backyard farming initiative. You would have seen with the rollout of the new CAF product, Business Recovery Program, that we are trying to incentivize persons in the form of a grant and loan so that they can undertake backyard farming for themselves, so as to make themselves more self-sufficient and resilient. What we have seen is that there's a need for us to use technology in terms of drones, and also to develop a national agro-processing industry. And we are extremely happy to hear when they indicated that the facility in Grace for the beekeepers will be operationalized very soon. Some of the research that he conducted indicated, the different places and areas that we have under cultivation now for the 7th crop that the government has identified, and the need for us to see how best we can improve and increase on the level of the acreage that is currently under cultivation. So, when we look closely at the research side of it, it's something that banks continually do. They want to be able to understand. That's why all banks, you'll find that there's a credit risk analyst, a risk analyst. Most of the bigger banks have economists that provide them with information that they can then take that and analyze it. And that's one of the key things that we're seeing recently in terms of data analytics, where we're able to pinpoint what the customer is looking for, and to be able to see how best we can facilitate them. In terms of the information coming out of our gender mainstreaming, we were able to indicate that the need to develop female customers who own small businesses to access bridge financing to implement bigger contracts. So in terms of our contractors who are doing the infrastructure work that I mentioned earlier, it's right now dominated by men. And there is a need for us to see how best we can enhance the access to these funds and financing by more female contractors. And that's going to be done through a process of us looking at entrepreneurial training and youth training, as well as outreach to rural areas to see how we could identify the unmet needs of those persons who will be able to access the funding. Some of the game changers that we're actually looking at, that It will take some time, but we are looking to implement a green affordable housing program. And this will see us aligned with the National Housing Corporation, the Ministry of Housing, the National Insurance Corporation, Invest St. Lucia, and the St. Lucia Mortgage Finance Company. And ideally, it would be to ensure that there are sufficient energy savings in the new buildings that we construct. There's sufficient water storage and savings that we want to be able to ensure that all new constructions have, and also even the materials used to ensure that we are not, causing an increase in our overall gas emissions and so on. We're also looking at the financial structure. But before we get there, we're also looking to see how we could empower the youth and to mobilize resource centers that we have throughout St. Lucia, where we can train persons in carpentry, masonry, electricians, and have them certified. There is a certification that is being done by the International Financial Corporation called EDGE, which ensures that your project, your product that you have in terms of your construction is now certified as being a green project. So if we train those persons and mobilize the young people, we will be, or even the unemployed, we saw that our unemployment rate had reached 29% now. If we're able to establish these centers where people can be retrained and now move into new sectors, or in a sector that they worked in, but maybe at a hotel, but now they can work for themselves. We are looking to see how best we can modify the ownership structure for more persons to access affordable housing. This is something that we are working on, that we will be rolling out shortly. We are also in discussions in the creation of an investment fund. I saw where Dr. Gilbertha indicated the need for us to have that. And we are looking very closely, because one of the things that we have identified is the need for the bank to have a greater level of capitalization so that it can undertake larger projects and do all of the things that we have planned. We want to be able to lead on some of the PPPs and privatization that we see as necessary. Our colleagues at the bank, the Development Bank of Jamaica, they created a unit specifically to assist the government of Jamaica with the privatization and or forming PPPs for their statutory bodies. The Jamaicans had 32 statutory bodies that were in deplorable conditions. And when I read the information, they're not very far from a few of the entities that we do have in St. Lucia that have traditionally been supported through the government. They have come up with a program which transparently allows for those entities now to become more efficient. Either they become efficiently still under the control of the government, or they become privatized, which will then see a more efficient operation based on the profit motive. One of the things that we are working on, we have partnered with Invest St. Lucia in the creation of an entrepreneur hub. Right now, the virtual platform is called Boost, and I encourage persons to go there and direct persons there, because it's really an interactive platform that allows the entrepreneur or the potential entrepreneur to be trained, to have access to information, and or to meet his peers and other colleagues who may give him some information that will lead him on his way. In terms of our linkages and linking our priorities to the projects, we have collaborated, as I indicated, with the World Bank and the Climate Investment Fund. We are working closely with CDB. We are moving forward with both CDF and ECCB in terms of their credit enhancement programs. The CDF, the CARICOM Development Fund, have created the Credit Risk Abatement Facility, which is providing a credit guarantee for persons looking to access renewable and energy efficient projects, and they are lacking the sufficient collateral to be able to do so. Similarly, the ECCB has invited the Development Bank to be a part of the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Program that will again allow us to facilitate persons who need to have access to credit but don't have the sufficient collateral to do so. We are also working with GT Invest, which is a part of an agency from the European Commission, and they are assisting us in our approach to the Green Climate Fund with a concept paper. We are also working with the Green Climate Fund towards accreditation and are undergoing a gap assessment as we speak. And we're hoping to have the accreditation sometime, hopefully in the new year. We are also looking to partner with the Global Green Growth Institute, GGGI, who are working closely with the OECS in ensuring that entities have access to financing and can develop bankable projects. Locally, we are working with all agencies, the SBDC, the Small Business Development Unit, the South Louis Community College, the Invest Lucia, Exports Lucia, the National Skills Development Center. These are all partners who work with us to achieve the socioeconomic development of the people of St. Lucia. We are also in the process of working with, and I think Mr. Luisi mentioned, the German Savings Foundation, who are partnering with us to do the design thinking courses. So they have trained us, as well as I think members of the chamber, to be able to look and see how we can get persons to have the bankable project, have the business that they want to start, other than moving from just the idea to having a solid business footing. And that's where we are seeing the research that needs to be done, because some persons, when they do enter the doors, they have the idea, but they may not have thought through all of the processes. The Development Bank stands ready to be able to facilitate persons in being able to access credit and to move from research to innovation. We continue to applaud Mr. Giles Romulus and the Small Grants Program, and we continue to provide our support. Thank you very much.